Hi there. My name is April Schendel, and I am going to be sharing a presentation with you today about the organizational structure of the school where I work and comparing it to an organizational structure theory. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Look at moving. Okay. So the school where I work is called Notre Dame de Sion. It is an all-girls private Catholic high school where I personally work, although we have two schools. So here is our organizational chart. I am blessed because this was already made. We have undergone a lot of changes throughout my time at this school. This is my 15th year, but some of it has always remained somewhat the same. So you can see that all the way up at the top here is our board of trustees. So that's a very important group of people. They are basically the boss of our president, as she has said before. And then we also have our board of trustees that works as much as they possibly can with the congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Sion, who is the order of nuns that started our school back in 1912. And then, of course, we try to work in collaboration as well with the Archdiocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph, although we are an independent Catholic school. Oops. So looking at our president, who's Alicia Katarba, so she oversees two schools, our lower school, which is co-ed, grades pre-K through 8. And then she, of course, oversees all things throughout all campus. So you can see throughout our kind of almost looking like a family tree. So then our next level of leadership would fall to kind of our principals and vice principals and directors of various things. So we have our grade school principal, who is in charge of many things down below. Our high school principal, who is Mrs. McDonough, Natalie, who is in charge of all kinds of different areas. This is where I work, so in charge of our assistant principal, office manager, athletic directors, assistant athletic directors, coaches, visual, and then we've got a director of performing arts, Elizabeth Mulkey, director of theology and service learning, campus minister, and guidance counselors. And then also at the high school, we have a principal for academics, Ellen Carmody, who also is in charge of directors, which we used to have department chairs, but now they've been replaced with directors. So we have a director of humanities, STEAM, experiential learning, college counseling, and then our assistant director of college counseling. And then of course, our principal for academics is in charge of all faculty, and then our academic services coordinator. And then we also have a board of trustees kind of committee who oversees our mission director. And then we have our financial president and chief financial officer, who's kind of like our CEO, CFO has been the title that we've used in the past. And then we also have a vice president of marketing and community engagement, which is of course super important, especially for a private school. So you can see that there's been a lot of thought put into our leadership, the structure, our organizational chart. And in the past, we have had a head of school instead of a president. But we've had a board of trustees ever since the school went from actually being in charge with the nuns who started the school. The order of nuns were in charge of it until the 90s. And then we started having a head of school, and now we have a president. So this, in my opinion, is most in line with what I would call, what would be called distributed leadership. So this information was from an outside source. But defined, it means distributed leadership is not something done by an individual to others or a set of individual actions through which people contribute to a group or an organization. It's more of a group activity that works through and within relationships rather than individual actions. So you can see there's a lot of different groups of people who are all in the same order of command, if you will. It's not the responsibility of just one person. And it is a social process. I think especially maintaining our roots with the Sisters of Notre Dame de Sion. And so this is some information about distributed leadership that was in the sources provided for us. And it did mention in this article that distributed leadership can come about through 4 mechanisms, either by design, by default, by evolution and also by crisis, and that these are not mutually exclusive. Being that this school is over 100 years old, I am not completely fully versed on what the leadership was like for the whole entire time, but I think that this has come about by design somewhat because there was a congregation of nuns who were all in charge. I don't believe it was ever by default. By evolution, absolutely. I have seen the school evolve even in my 15 years. And even in that time, we have experienced times of crisis where we have kind of switched up our organizational structure. So this really reminded me of my school. Division of labor is something that was pointed out to in this source as well about the distributed leadership, saying that particular posts are identified as having particular responsibilities. And so that definitely reminded me of my school's organizational leadership. Negotiated order between leaders and followers. And then followers are not just doers, but are best understood as a composing element of leadership activity. And I do think that that really applies to my school as well. We hear a lot about our leadership team, our administrative team, to make decisions and foster change. So there are 3 types of distributed leadership that are outlined in the source that was provided to us. There's collaborated distribution, where 2 or more leaders work together. Collective distribution, where 2 or more leaders who perform a leadership routine while working separately, but also interdependently. And then also coordinated distribution, where 2 or more activities have to be performed in a particular sequence. This was termed as being like a relay race in the source that we had. For Notre Dame de Sion schools, again, I think ours really speaks more to collective distribution, where we have 2 or more leaders that are performing a leadership routine while working separately but interdependently. And I think that really reminds me of the relationship between the grade school and the high school, because we are one school really, but there's very different situations that come up between these 2 very different buildings. And then collaborated distribution as well, where 2 or more leaders work together. That happens very much, I think, at the separate schools as well, where the next rank of leadership, where the principal and vice principal and principal of academics and all of that would work together. And so here's my organizational chart again. And then there was a little bit of talk about distributed leadership, about parallel performance, and that how emphasis is put on identifying, developing, and retaining leaders of tomorrow. I think this very much reminds me of my school. There have been, especially in our directors, one of our current directors was a teacher just last year. Many of our directors are teachers at the same time. And so there's always been an emphasis on developing leadership at our school, also encouraging the distribution of leadership. And again, even though we've had different kind of official structures, there's always been a distribution of leadership from what I can see. There's a lot of support for that distribution of leadership. And then there's a school board, but in our case, it would be a board of trustees who is supported. And so here are my references. So thank you very much.